Good evening. This is Barkha Dutt and you're with the Mojo Story, our digital platform that does a deep dive into the biggest issues of the day. On the program today, we're looking at the Supreme Court and the Chief Justice's very intriguing comments on communalism and the Indian media. He was responding to a petition that was seeking to de-link the media coverage and the Tablighi Jamaat when it comes to the spread of COVID-19. Let's bring up our big focus on the program today. Chief Justice Ramana has slammed the Indian media's propensity to give a communal color to every incident and every story. As we mentioned, the petitioners in the Supreme Court were making the argument that the media has basically defamed the Tablighi Jamaat and linking it to the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic in communal terms. The Chief Justice, generally speaking, said that this communal color in the media to every story is giving the country a bad name. In response, the government's top law officer made a reference of the contentious new digital content guidelines because the Chief Justice also placed his focus on YouTube and other digital platforms. The kind of phrases we've seen in broadcast media recently through the pandemic have included phrases like Corona Jihad and even Choodi love Jihad while talking about the assault on a bangle seller in Madhya Pradesh who was later accused of child sexual abuse. The Chief Justice's comments were more about digital media, it seems, but is it digital media or mainstream broadcast media where communalism really resides? That's our big focus on the program today. Let's introduce our guests and bring them up as we look at this contentious question around our media. We're joined by Kota and Neelima, who's of course an author and a researcher, done a lot of work on the politics of representation on broadcast media. Welcome, Neelima. We're also joined by Manisha. Manisha Pande is the executive editor with Newslaundry, easily runs the best media satire program in the country. Welcome, Manisha. Rajat Sethi is with us. He's a political analyst. He is an advisor to the Manipur government. Welcome, Rajat. And we're also joined now by Zafar Sareshwala, who's an educationist and has often spoken up about issues that relate to the Muslim community in India. Zafar bhai, thank you as well. Manisha, let me start with you because you amuse all of us by poking fun at my erstwhile medium, the television profession. But even I'm staggered when I step back and look at the language that has been used on television media in the past 16 months. I had almost forgotten Corona Jihad myself. That was a phrase that was used when the media was covering the Tablighi Jamaat. More recently, the bangle seller, a poor man who was assaulted in Indore, later charged with child sexual abuse. Choodi being bangle, Choodi love Jihad were phrases that were used by media platforms. The Chief Justice's comments, how do you see them?
I think
I can't hear you. Yeah, go ahead, Manisha.
Okay. So he's obviously raising a really valid issue, and at Newslaundry, in fact, we've done a huge audit on how reporting was carried on the Tablighi Jamaat for almost 2 months. All sorts of fake news spread about them, all sorts of accusations leveled at them which weren't substantiated. A lot of these, interestingly, a lot of the news that came out about them was debunked by the police. So you had instances where a news channel like Z would say something like they're spitting at people or they're flashing at someone, and the police would put out a tweet and saying कि ऐसा नहीं हुआ है कहीं भी, तो please कृपया fake news मत फैलाइए. What I thought was interesting about the remarks in the court was that though the judges are talking about the problem of communalization in the media and giving every news event a communal turn, they then start talking about how the problem is digital media, and how the digital media, there's a problem of fake news on YouTube and there needs to be a regular self-regulatory mechanism, and TV has it, print has it, but digital doesn't have it, which is all fine, but has regulation work for television? If you look at, and in fact, this is what my next show is about. Over the past 15 days, we looked at some of the top anchors like Arnab, Anjana, the usual suspects, Sudhir. They've done close to 70 debates on Taliban, 70 debates on Afghanistan and Taliban. These debates are not giving us any information on the geopolitics, on what's happening there, not really informing us. Of course, it's a huge world, it's world news that we should be covering. But those 70 debates are basically about, Taliban, what they're doing, then somehow come to the point that how the problem is basically Islam, bring in a few, loose mouths, some clerics who've said some nonsense, and then extrapolate it to say that, look, the problem is Muslims. And this is the kind of formula now that you're seeing across television news. So while the judges have raised an important issue, you have to look at self-regulation, whether it's working for television, which is the biggest spreader of,
it's a super spread. It's a super spreader of communalism. I would argue, but I want to ask you something. Aren't you struck by the irony that it is completely legit for Taliban spokespeople, and the Taliban last checked was still a terror organization, to appear in this very sort of templated, civilized form of an interview? But God forbid that you should grant Indian Muslims, even those with extreme opinions, not that I justify those, the same civility. Aren't you struck by that irony, Manisha?
Yeah, are you talking about CNN?
CNN to start with.
Interviewing Anas Haqqani. Yeah, it was really a nothing interview also, because also if you're interviewing them, then you've got to ask them tough questions, So the interview was also just that, what is your worldview? What do you think of Afghanistan? And he just got to soft pedal all his, that we are for peace and all that, and no questions asked. And these are the same anchors that, have called Umar Khalid, whose bail plea apparently, if you read how the arguments went in the court, what is the kind of evidence they have against him? These are the same sort of anchors that have gone after Indian Muslims like Umar Khalid, accusing him, declaring him guilty in the court of prime time, saying that, he's somehow the mastermind of Delhi riots with no proof whatsoever. And, constantly cornering any dissenting voice in the media or in the public sphere while you, talk to a Taliban spokesperson or a Haqqani network spokesperson.
Yeah. And Rajat, let me ask you this, right? How did we get to a point where Umar Khalid, is a villain? And I'm not saying that I agree with Umar Khalid's politics or I don't. I'm not discussing Umar Khalid here. I'm saying whatever he is, however extreme you may find him, he's a fellow citizen. He's facing the law in this country, but he's still a fellow citizen. But there is more space for Anas Haqqani, a known terrorist. There is more space for Sultan Shaheen, the spokesperson of the Taliban. The civility, the manners that are extended to Taliban spokespeople are not extended to Umar Khalid or his lawyer. And you locate all of that within the Chief Justice's remarks, which after all are in response to a petition that says that the Tablighi Jamaat was used to vilify Indian Muslims.
So there are multiple statements that you have made here, Barkha. And lot is what the Chief Justice said today is with a lot of benefit of hindsight. Okay. Now, you need to go back to the dates when COVID was just starting. There were hardly 100 cases. And suddenly you see so many people who were all, either within the mosque and then moving out from there into specific geographies when there was total ban on travel. So you need to situate all of the discussions around Tablighi in those times when there was this fear of unknown. Today, it's very easy to come in and sit together and discuss about what vilification was there or not there, but you need to keep the context in mind. That is part number one. Number two is that a similar kind of a specific community was targeted even with the Haridwar Shahi Snans. If you remember, the Kumbh was going on. And of course, we can again go back with a lot of benefit of hindsight at this stage and see that was the Haridwar Snan or the Haridwar Kumbh reason for the pandemic or the second wave of the pandemic. There are absolutely, the data is out that Uttarakhand wasn't the hotspot anywhere close the way Maharashtra and Kerala is, especially Kerala, which still continues to be reeling under COVID. And let me come back on Kerala topic. Kerala, again, we all know, and by the way, none of the mainstream channels and YouTube channels ever did any kind of on-ground reporting of why is Kerala becoming the hotspot and why.
I mean, my colleague did go to Kerala. I couldn't go myself. I've done a bunch of shows on Kerala, but my own colleague did. Yeah.
Again,
but again,
the fact is fact. No, please, one second, please. So what I'm trying to say is nobody. They all moved into UP, etc. They did their, rigorous data-based analytical reporting from the ground, quote unquote. But then they went out. They did not go to Kerala, and then the Kerala government comes out and allows Eid celebrations to go unimpeded, have 3 or 4 days lifting of curfew in that space, just to allow one specific religion have a free run and enjoy the festivals. This is
how do you link this? How do you link it to the Chief Justice's remarks?
I'm coming to that. So as I said, there are multiple layers of what he said. He said that there is communalism being practiced by media, certain media sections, of course, on the YouTube channel as well as on the mainstream channel. That is part one of his conversation. The part two was what he was actually hearing was a case centered around Tablighi. Now, the Tablighis, as I said, you can now sit on a judgment because you have ample amount of data to come to that conclusion. Back in those days, you did not have that conclusion. And therefore, a lot of fake news was funneled in during those times because it was feeding into that fear of unknown that people had.
Okay, generally
so it's very easy to judge the whole society.
Fair enough.
But it's not fair.
But do you think that television is more communal than digital media? I'm asking you in a general. I'm not asking you about Tablighi vis-a-vis Kumbh, or Kerala vis-a-vis UP. I'm asking you as a viewer. Do you think television prime time is more communal than most digital platforms that you serve?
So again, there are all kinds of digital platforms which funnel in a lot of hatred. So I can't put a number to which percentage wise which is more toxic, the mainstream channel or some of these fringe YouTube channels. But I can tell you for sure what is happening in the media in today's day and age is not comfortable. It is not comfortable for me. I don't feel comfortable watching those. Neither are they adding any information to me, but certainly they are feeding into the fears of the unknown of the society at large, which should be controlled by some self-regulation perhaps, or with some level of supervision coming in from the top.
Okay. Now, as Manisha said, television already has a self-regulating, not one, but two industry bodies. And we have not actually seen, the kind of toxicity that we see on primetime diminish at all. In fact, television is at virtual loggerheads with itself. There are two self-regulatory industry bodies now. There is a clear ideological division between the sort of right-wing and the liberal channels. And that is the truth of the broadcast media today. So I'm intrigued that the Chief Justice, after making his comments, then chose to focus on YouTube, which Rajat, you call fringe, but it obviously has the Chief Justice's attention. Now, Neelima, I want you to take us through some of the analysis you've done of the kind of content, the words used most often in prime time, the issues covered most often. Let's go through that and then try and locate what the Chief Justice has said looking at those slides. Neelima, go ahead.
Barkha, I'm very glad to be joining this panel with some facts and figures because I think it helps in putting the rhetoric in perspective, both anti and pro. Well, I mean, all said and done, facts and figures don't lie. I have shared some of the slides with you, some of the analysis with you. I'd like to, if we are beginning with this, but there is an important slide which comes a little later, which will, as the panelist was saying, that the vilification is not there. Well, we'll get to that a little later. So here is an anchor statement analysis. Rate the Debate and Institute of Perception Studies has been studying this for more than a year now. What we do is analyze each anchor's statement analysis, what Barkha has been referring to, the words, the meaning to the words, what does it mean to repeatedly say something, what kind of an impact it has on the audience. Now here it is very clear, comment plus opinion. That's over much more than reportage. And fact is just 4% of one anchor statement analysis. All of this is more details on when it was, what context it was, everything is on our website of the Institute. If I can go to the next slide.
Yeah, we'll bring up the next slide, but you can just, in the meantime, take us through some of your key findings and we'll keep bringing up the slides. So go ahead.
No, Barkha, what we did was we realized the absolute necessity to analyze the language of the anchor, because it was not merely that at the time of prime time, they were choosing certain topics and focusing on them. It's also the way they presented. Here is something called the anchor language analysis, which we do for each anchor over an extended period of time. I have just taken a snapshot because of a limited amount of time of what was happening during the Bengal election. For instance, these were the words which were most commonly being used: Jai Shri Ram, Hindu, Muslim, Nandigram, CAA. We even have numerical data to back this, as well as percentages, which words were most used. Now, in a pyramidal structure, the least focus is always on fact. That is the truth with the structure of the prime time debate. That's what we have been also doing about topic distribution, about how the emphasis is distributed in a prime time debate. Now, all of this, I mean, also the further slides will show, all of this actually points to something very important. Now, here is August, this is between August and September 2020. And this considerable time had passed from the Tablighi incident to this. And yet, 29% of a prime time debate was spent talking about love jihad, Tablighis, and Jamaat riots, etc. And of course, 47 China and Pakistan, because this had happened after Galwan, etc. So this was the focus. The focus by this time was not even Corona. When you remember, at this time, the first wave had not even ended. But this was the focus, of the prime time debate. I just want to say that the point that it was justified, as one of the panelists said, it is justified fear. Was it justified in August and September 2020? After 4 months or 3 months of the incident, you were still trying to revisit that particular thing and build on that.
Hold on. You've given us a lot to chew on, and let's take it around the panel. I think some of the key findings, no surprises there, is that opinion plus comment is greater than reportage plus fact. Fact, just plain old-fashioned fact, is less than 5% of the content on our mainstream media, and arguably, we should be honest here, even on digital platforms, right? So let's not also act holier than thou. Our media in general has moved more towards opinion. Even liberal platforms are no different, in my observation. They're also driven a lot now by ideology and opinion, and so old-fashioned fact and reportage is taking a back seat. But I want to return, armed with some of Neelima's findings, to Zafar Sareshwala. The most commonly used words, even by anchors, Hindu, Muslim, love, jihad, and so on. Jai Shri Ram at the height of the Bengal election, because it was a highly politicized slogan at that time. Zafar Sareshwala, when you look at the Tablighi Jamaat actually going to the Supreme Court and saying, and groups that are supporting them saying, you did us an injustice, and you look at how the Taliban is represented by contrast, would you say the Indian media has been kinder to the Taliban than it was to the Tablighi Jamaat?
Yes, absolutely, Barkha. I mean, I've been very closely associated with most of the editors of the present day media which you were naming, most of them, since last 20 years. I know all of them. When Tabligh Jamaat, and I remember what Mahesh Bhatt once told me about one particular leader in Mumbai. When he used to, the kind of language he was using in public meeting, he was saying कि Zafar भाई, वो leader को मत बोलो, वो बोलता है जो सुनने वालों को अच्छा लगता है, because a leader speaks what people like to hear. तो बोले हम लोग फिल्मों में वो दिखाते हैं जो आपको अच्छा लगता है. Same thing with media now. For Barkha to think self-regulatory and reportage, I mean, these are absolutely bygone things now. They want to show jo bikta hai. At the time of Tabligh Jamaat, one of the very senior editors of the country, I spoke to him. He said, "Yaar Zafar bhai, बोले यार हमारा ये बिकता है. बोले ये जो तबलीग जमात की जो स्टोरी है मौलाना साद की, अगर हम 4 बड़े-बड़े रिपोर्टरों को लगाते तब भी प्लेटर में नहीं मिलती और ये बिकती है. The moment we put, he showed me how it is, how people love it. So, the media today is, and I'm very sorry to say, it's not about news, it's not about anything, it's about TRP, what is sold, kya bikta hai. And yes, about Taliban. It is, so, and what has happened now? Lot of people, Barkha, are not watching television now. Lot of people, they are not watching television. वो बोलते हैं वही दिखाएगा हिंदू मुसलमान तबलीग जमात पाकिस्तान, लोग बोलते ही है. People are saying this. And about Taliban, yes, as if Taliban तो बहुत कोई अच्छे हो गए. In fact, this Sohail Shaheen, the gentleman who's coming, he was brought in by an Indian think tank 9 months ago. I was there on that show 9 months ago. GCTC is one of the foremost global counter-terrorism council. they had brought Shaheen as chief guest. And Barkha, you know who was introduced? A lady DIG of UP presently. I'm not naming her. She was the one who was using, oh my God, the kind of phrases for Sultan Sohail Shaheen. And he was introduced. He spoke for 1 hour in that GCTC conclave. And who was listening? They were retired army generals, retired Air Force generals, ambassadors. I mean, these were the kind of people listening to whom? The spokesperson of Taliban. And now a channel which every day floods with Hindu-Muslim has gall to bring Hussein Haqqani. I mean,
Hussein nahi, Anas. Hussein
Anas
Haqqani bichara. Hussein Haqqani bichara.
Yeah.
So,
Anas Haqqani. Anas Haqqani has a $4 million inam on him. And he is one of the dreaded terrorists declared by UN. And this channel, जो सुबह दोपहर शाम हिंदू मुसलमान दिखाते हैं, तबलीग जमात को विलन दिखाते हैं, they have gall to show Hussein, this Anas Haqqani, and people bringing Sohail Shaheen as if he is some great, and I asked these people that how on earth you brought this Sohail Shaheen? He said, नहीं Zafar भाई, ये तालिबान का मामला नहीं है, ये geopolitics है, और ये बहुत important है आने वाले दिनों में. And now suddenly Haqqani, this Anas Haqqani, $4 million का इनाम है उसके ऊपर, वो कुछ भी नहीं है, वो जेल में से अभी छूटा है, वो कुछ भी नहीं है. तो यानी तालिबान अब जो है वो ज्यादा मोहब्बत है उससे, और हिंदुस्तान का मुसलमान जो है बेचारा, यानी हिंदुस्तान के 2-4 मुसलमानों ने सिर्फ, I mean I can say 4 or 5 or maybe 6 who said some good words about Taliban, and as if they were projected as if 250 million Muslims are about them, and they have no problem bringing this Sohail Shaheen. And in fact, one very, I'm not naming, a very important correspondent of the country was after me कि Zafar भाई कोई भी हालत में मुझे सोहेल शाहीन से कनेक्ट करवा दी, and I did that. तो ये तो है. तो Barkha, to understand or to even for a second believe that these television channels are about news or reportage, I think we are in a fool's paradise. It is about making money. It is about TRP. It is about nothing beyond that.
Okay, that's I have to say that I think you've made some really great points, but we're at a very dangerous inflection point if we're all sort of agreeing that the toxicity in the mainstream media and sections of the digital media is a very, very dangerous sort of point for our society. Now, here's my worry, Manisha. I'll start with you. Zafar Sareshwala says it's like movies. You show people what they want. And he may have a point there, because if this didn't work with audiences, it would reflect somewhere. And these channels are not necessarily driven by any ideology, even by the ideology of hate. They're obviously driven by something else. Do you think that it's okay to pass the buck back onto what the audience wants, Manisha?
Not at all. Can I just add one point? Because I think Ms. Zafar made a very interesting point of 4 or 5 Muslims who said certain things about Taliban and TV media making a huge big deal about it. It's also interesting that these people who make these comments will often be brought on to primetime debates. So you will not have a Zafar on primetime debates. They go out looking for radical kind of people who can say stupid things to then make it seem like, oh look, this is how Muslims are. So it's like a symbiotic thing. You look at the spokespersons who come on to represent minority communities on primetime shows, it's a joke. Most of them aren't even, they are not really scholarly, they've not really studied. They don't have any competence apart from just being able to mouth crap. But okay, on your point on audiences, I always find it very lazy when journalists just say, oh, this is what people want to watch. I don't think that's true. I think that there's a lot of demand out there for good news, for good content, for information. And I can tell you from Newslaundry's experiences that we do have a lot of people who value good journalism, value reporting. I'm sure with you also, when you were reporting on the ground during the first wave, during the second wave, you did have a lot of people reaching out and saying great work. Look, there will always be a mass audience for baser, big boss kind of shows. Of course, that will always sell. But in the news business, are we going to compete with Big Boss? I mean, that is a call that you also have to take. We are in the business of news. And while we do want audiences, every journalist wants to be read, wants to be heard, wants to be seen. But we want to do that while still being journalists, not while being entertainers, performers, or reality TV show stars.
Yeah.
So I think it's just very convenient to blame the audience. I think it is completely our fault. And when you give good stuff out there, there are people hungry out there to consume good news.
I agree with you. I don't know that we have all cracked the revenue models for what makes this reportage driven content tick, but it's certainly. Sorry, you want 15 seconds? I'm going to go to Rajat. Yeah, okay, Zafar, right, go ahead.
I would try. Yes, Manisha, you are right. One very respectable channel head, he said, I said कि यार मेरे को तो बोलने दो आकर. तो बोले यार जफर भाई देखो ऐसा है, हमको दाढ़ी वाला मुसलमान जो अकल की बात करता हो नहीं चाहिए.
Exactly.
हमको टीवी पे ऐसा चाहिए जिसकी 6 इंच की दाढ़ी हो, 3 इंच की टोपी हो और वो वाहियात किस्म की बात करता हो.
Exactly, you're very right.
The moment a particular leader who's got only one seat in the parliament, he says something, immediately there is discussion in mainstream media about what he has said. So they want, it is by design, they don't want intelligent Muslims who talk sense on television. They want कि ऐसे मुसलमानों जो वाहियात किस्म की बात करें. हमको ऐसा दाढ़ी वाला नहीं चाहिए. He said to me, ऐसा दाढ़ी वाला नहीं चाहिए जो अकल की बात करता हो. बोले यार हमारा तुम बिगाड़ देते हो.
Now the question is what is to be done. Rajat, your opening comments said that you're very uncomfortable, irrespective of what you agree, disagree with. You're very uncomfortable with the state of media today. Self-regulation appears to have failed. Government regulation cannot be the answer, right? We have these new contentious guidelines, which, by the way, are about the digital platform. Where do we go from here? And if passing this on to the audience is lazy, and there I agree with Manisha that I may read sort of a film fare at the beauty parlor, and I may watch Big Boss while eating my dinner, but that's not why I signed up to be a journalist. There has to be a distinction. We're all in different spaces. What's the solution?
Well, what Zafar Bhai was actually mentioning, that the media actually looks for certain specific type of Muslims, it is actually true for even looking for specific types of Hindus as well. I mean, the spokesperson of Karni Sena was brought into the limelight as if his views are the views of the majority. Even that is wrong. That is also a very caricaturing of Hindu religion. I know that a lot of reasonable people absolutely detest what he was saying in those, this Mahasabha, Karni Mahasabha, or whatever, wherever he said whatever he was saying. But see, these are the kind of people who get audience, who get these primetime TV slots to come in and share their opinion. This is perhaps the easy most route for them to do politics, because you say something, the next day you get political dividends. So therefore, it is not specifically about one religion. And if you are saying that it is specifically about religion, you're again communalizing the issue. So what I'm trying to tell you is that what is selling on television is actually pretty agnostic to religion. They want all kinds of crazy people to come in and say crazy things. That's the status quo, in my opinion. Now, how do you change that? Changing that requires a long haul change. I personally feel that India is wasting a lot of crucial years when we need to be focusing all the energies of the youth of this country to productive means to enhance India's economic might, because we understand the window for that democratic advantage is hardly 10 years to 15 years. If we waste our years, because of media's entire focus on these issues, we are losing out on time. And that builds in, and the entire perverse kind of system to placate people who are trying to come in and pose on communal issues. They get dividends politically, and that's the conveyor belt of sorts which is running around even in politics. The incentives are distorted, and incentives are distorted in media. Incentives are distorted even in politics, and that is why this merry-go-round is going on and on. If we and people who are with the right intention, who put the nation first, if we don't take a step back, and if we are not seeing where we are going wrong and where we are wasting time, China, Pakistan, all of these will become even bigger threats going forward. And we need to, start thinking.
I know one of the points that you've made that I think is very interesting is that, for all of us who are students of media studies, we all read Noam Chomsky, who spoke about how the media manufactures consent. But in India, broadcast media manufactures dissent. And you're absolutely right that when a programming is done, you look for the most extreme voices. Nobody wants nuance. Nobody wants complexity. You say, ladai honi chahiye. Bhai, ladai honi chahiye. That is how television prime time is actually organized. Neelima, I hand this to you. Sorry, Manisha, you want to jump in and then Neelima?
I just wanted to respond to Rajat, though I don't think the equivalence between Karni Sena and what I was saying is correct. Because when Karni Sena guys were brought on, they were projected as loons. And there were enough Hindus on the panels also who were saying that these guys are loonies. And, enough Rajput representation and all. Which is a way different from what happens with Muslim panelists day in and day out. If you look at people like Swami Chakrapani who are brought on, I don't know why this guy is on television news, but he's talking about economy, he's talking about opposition, he's talking about all sorts of things. His claim to fame is that he wanted to, name the parliament building some Hindutva building or something, and he does all kinds of loony kind of things. He's brought on as a legit voice, and the anchors treat him with kid clubs. With Muslims,
that's what Rajat is saying. That's what Rajat is saying, that you're presenting this fringe voice as if he represents the mainstream.
But that fringe voice is presented as a very good mainstream voice. There's no opposition to what a Swami Chakrapani says.
Okay, Rajat, you want to briefly respond? Then I'll go to Neelima. Rajat?
But see, this is how you elicit, extreme responses from both the sides. This is the job of an anchor. They'll get people, deal with soft gloves on one side, and then the other side gets riled up, and then they come out with all kinds of crazy statements. That's how they sell their programs.
And
it's an ongoing thing. How do you break that? That's the challenge.
The part that I do agree with is that there is a deliberate seeking out of extreme views, that nuance is considered boring, that middle ground is considered boring, that even sort of, even sort of liberal friends, Neelima, have told me in particular, I can share a personal example, कि यार centrists के लिए कोई जगह नहीं है, centrists are fence sitters, whatever they imagine your politics to be, if you look at an issue, for example, right? And you kind of get sort of slapped around by both sides, as it were. Neelima, what does your research actually tell you about extremity, about dialogue, about debate, about whether, all communities are actually caricatured as Rajat has argued?
No, firstly, of course, I do not believe that the audience wants this. I mean, this is number one. Let me just say this, that the way the mass perception is manufactured is that a small or a small... this is a prime time tracker, which we have for the day, August 23rd. If you remember, LPG price was hiked by 25 rupees. On the same day or a day before, the bangle seller incident had happened in Indore, Madhya Pradesh. Here we have 11 channels. This is over 25,000 seconds we had analyzed to see who was doing what on that day at prime time. And the colors, I don't know if they are clear. If they are clear, they will show just 599 seconds on third wave of corona, which is round the corner according to all reports. Bangle seller, 241 seconds. That's all. In this entire time, 25,470 seconds, just 241 seconds on that communal issue where we know what happened. Now, my point here is that this may not be what the people are thinking, but that's how mass perception is manufactured. People might want to know, people might want to actually have a more balanced, nuanced, secular, more objective point of view. But the way mass perception is manufactured in a very industrialized media, where it's very capital intensive, is that a small section of perception is imposed on the larger audience. Here we have a debate. This goes back to 2020, and this is 66% of the debates of a particular anchor consistently were on religion and communal politics. And the other, of course, we had education at 4%. We had SSR in those times, the SSR murder and all. That was, incident. That was at 15%, and Rafael at 4%. But religion, 66%. That's the distribution of the topics on Ram Mandir and Delhi riots. My point simply is that if all what the panelists are saying, that, if prime time debates do not focus on unemployment, which is at 9.6%, if they are not focusing on LPG price hike, why are they not worried about the audience leaving them? Because they do not depend on the TRPs. They do not need the audience. Their survival is from some other source. And that's at the core of mass production of perception, which we are seeing today, a very narrow perception being imposed on the rest of the population.
That's a very interesting point. They are basically saying big media doesn't need big audiences because it either has big money or big advertising backing it.
And Barkha, the argument is that the people want it. That's the way you sell something. The people want it. So they want to say people want Muslims to be vilified, or they think that they deserve to be vilified. But maybe that's not the point. I mean, maybe they do not want that.
Yeah.
But at an individual level, one is intimidated by this collective, constant mainstreaming of a particular point of view. And that gets countered.
I think this is a fascinating point, that, the cliche around television is it's a TRP chaser. TRP is a television rating point, which is the audience. You're actually saying, upending our understanding of how TV markets work, that this media doesn't need an audience. Zafar, we have to close. I'll give you a last word. Zafar, Sareshwala.
Yeah, I'll continue from where Neelima said. Look, in our country, we see everything for free. We don't pay anything. You take BBC. BBC shows everything what they want to, because they get £2 billion plus as subscription. You take New York Times. It gets $800 million as subscription. हमारे यहाँ तो एक पेपर ₹5 का 25 लोग पढ़ते हैं. तो we don't pay. Somebody else is paying. तो वो जो देता है ना उसकी चलती है. इसलिए हम तो मुफ्त में देखते हैं. हमको मुफ्त में दे दें की आदत है.
We are better than Newslaundry subscription.
Yeah, while you're at it for Newslaundry, don't forget the rest of us. No, but listen, this is a serious point. This is a very serious point that Neelima has made, and I do want closing remarks from Rajat and Manisha on it as well. That big media doesn't need the audience. Rajat, quickly, literally 30 seconds to both of you. Rajat?
I think, again, we all need to collectively take a step back and not go on extreme views on either sides, and keep the focus around important issues. And that is what is going to serve the nation in the best possible way. There are a lot of well-meaning people on all the sides. Let me tell you that. If you start vilifying one side, even the rational people get, agitated about the state of affairs. So a balance is what is needed from all sides.
Yeah, and Manisha, to this point, that instead of chasing populism, actually this is now an industry that doesn't care about its audience.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's one way to look at it. But Barkha, I also feel like television is such a powerful medium, and it's when you tell a story visually, it just takes the story to the next level. I mean, if you look at, say, just something like a Hathras, everyone was reporting on it, but when we actually saw those visuals of the body being burnt at night, that had such an impact, and that took the case
but let me jump in there. No. I was going to say visual storytelling is powerful, but it can happen on mediums other than television today.
Yeah,
and that's why, and that is why in some ways so much has changed.
But TV still has a mass reach, I mean, and Aaj Tak will reach, some village in Uttarakhand also. It'll reach far-flung areas, which hopefully Newslaundry and Mojo will also reach. But we still can't look at TV as it is still a mass medium. It's still reaching out to a lot of people. So while it is utterly failing the people, we need to kind of also figure out how we can get it back on course. And I'm sure there are a lot of professionals in the television space too who want
of course they are, but unfortunately, I think, as Neelima says, the way revenue is both arranged and organized and generated, I think has actually spelt the death knell for quality in a medium that I used to love. I mean, and that is why I will always be a visual storyteller. I know no one is taking away anything from the power of visual storytelling, but where is the storytelling? As Neelima's figures tell us, reportage is a diminishing entity in this space, and that is a real tragedy. And everybody should be invested. We often say we get the governments we choose. I'm not putting this on the audience, but if we aren't getting the media we like, we need to all speak more about it than we do. We'll have to leave it there. We're out of time. Manisha, Rajat, Neelima, and Zafar Sareshwala, thank you. And to our audience, See you shortly. We have Nasiruddin Shah joining us live at about 7 p.m. This debate on whether the Indian media has been kinder